Hey, Mark, thanks for joining. Hey, everybody, we are just kicking off the live stream. It's the state of Web3 game development. And here today, we've got some awesome guests. We've got Board, who has a long history in the game industry and is working on a massive project. We've got Mark Long with us, who is from Shrapnel. He's the CEO of Shrapnel, and they are launching a AAA game in this market. So let's just do some super quick intros here. So I have a background of shipping games based on a lot of Hollywood IP, so Star Trek, Game of Thrones, Walking Dead, Archer, stuff like that. But for the last 4 years, I've been building a game infrastructure platform called Beamable that helps game developers go to market. We can talk more about that later. But Chris, you've been running these with me now for 3 weeks, so talk about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Chris Heatherly. I'm the CEO of the Mystery Society. We're a Web3 game that you can play on that you can play in your web browser. Mystery, it's a social deduction game, Among Us meets Clues sort of game, and we just relaunched on Immutable last week. We had a great tournament over the weekend that was successful for us, and we're working towards a mobile launch next week. So yeah, I've been pretty busy. Good to see everyone.
Thanks, Chris.
I'm psyched to have Mark Long and Board Elon. This is star-studded. I've been trying to get a one-on-one with Mark Long for a long time, so maybe I'll actually make it happen.
We'll do a one-on-one right here. We'll pull
Yeah,
out.
it was my schedule, not his, but yeah.
Mark, can you sorry to put you on the spot because you just swooped in as we went live, but Mark, maybe just share a little bit of an intro, your background, what you're doing at Shrapnel.
Yeah. First, let me just say thanks for having me on. Big fan of both of you guys too. We're all, I think, doing great work together. So I'm a 27-year game industry veteran. I've produced, I think, 32 titles in that period of time, everything from Sega Genesis to Oculus. And prior to this, I was head of games at HBO, and that's really where the Shrapnel team came from. We were a group that was going to be a bigger publishing group within HBO Warner Brothers. And prior to that, I ran xCloud at Microsoft, and then before that, I ran a studio that published Hawken. That poster behind me, if you remember that gorgeous first-person shooter, the early 10s. And then I ran my own studio where I moved to Seattle in 94 to start, called Zombie Studios. And I made a lot of very forgettable and some fun and great games there.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. And last but certainly not least, Board. And I guess the agreement is we're calling you Board. That's the name.
Let's go with that today. Yeah, appreciate you guys having me on today. Also, big shout out to the Shrapnel team. I am a very small angel investor in their company, and have been extremely impressed with the progress and super pumped to play more. So good to be on the same call with you, Mark. A little background on me. So I am a pseudonymous individual, I guess you could say. I've kept up the charade of Board Elon Musk on Twitter for the last 11 years. I've separated my digital identity from my real world identity. So I'll be somewhat cryptic in explaining my real world background. But essentially, I worked in the video games industry for over 10 years for a very large Japanese game publisher that you all absolutely have heard of. Had a lot of fun, got to do a lot of cool things like run E3. That doesn't exist anymore. And so at a certain point, I started to stumble upon crypto, and then in particular NFTs, and sort of combining my experience in the gaming industry with game design, with game economies, and then understanding, what crypto could do. I was like, aha, this is a very interesting intersection of my professional background and my personal interest in blockchain. So in 2021, pivoted pretty hard as the Board, persona into the world of gaming and specifically blockchain gaming. And that led me to today, which was co-founding a company called Edison. And Edison is trying to create a new category of entertainment. We're calling it massive multiplayer events. And it's a little bit of a cross between video games and concerts. Live digital experiences with tens of thousands of people in one place, having a lot of fun, being immersed, and something that you can access from anywhere in the world in your browser. It's a partnership with a company called Improbable, which has pioneered some really great metaverse technology. And since starting the business in late 2023, we've put on a bunch of events, a bunch of game modes. We've been experimenting really fast with different types of games to see what works, what doesn't, and sort of treating it like Netflix, like running pilots, seeing what sticks, what doesn't, and then putting more time and money into the stuff that works. And I will say that this coming Friday, we're launching our next game mode called City Shots, and it's going to be an arcade basketball game. And everyone's going to have 7 days to run around a city, score as many basketball hoops as they can, and hopefully win some really cool prizes. So if anyone's interested, they can check out edison.wtf. And that's the end of my shameless plug.
That's very cool. Are you working with Kevin Zia at all over there?
I have spoken to him a couple times, but generally it's been a very close relationship with the founders of Improbable. That's kind of how this got started.
Yeah. My very good friend of mine, or my former CFO, is the CFO of Improbable, and Zia is my former was my right hand guy at Disney and Universal. So really good guys.
Yeah, it's a great group of people. The only downside is that they're all based or most of them are based in the UK, and I'm in LA. So 8-hour difference means I'm waking up very early to interact with them.
And really, with Improbable, I mean, you can get in kind of like an infinite number of people into a game, right?
Yeah, well,
infinite, but yeah.
Infinite is a cool number.
The CTO wants me to tell you that officially 20,000 is the cap and that we cannot go over that. So I will say that is the official. And honestly, like, there have been events with MLB and some other really big brands, and no one has yet gotten over 10,000 concurrent players. I look forward to that happening. I'd love to break the system. It's very hard to go beyond that. It just becomes an experience that actually just might not even be fun for people. But yeah, we've regularly seen 500 to 1,000 people in one place. And what's interesting is that you can develop new game styles and game mechanics that can't exist when you have 20 people or 50 people in the same environment. And that's what's exciting to me, because a lot of times people feel like, well, I've seen this game before and this is like a slight variation on it. But when you have 1,000 people next to you, you can actually think of new game modes that maybe didn't exist before.
Yeah, like maybe a realistic version of Total Battle Simulator where it's all PvP would be fun. And
robots, it's people.
Improbable's had an interesting, story arc. I'm really happy to see them find, for a while they were, a solution looking for a problem, but now with these events, it seems like they finally found something great they can be doing for the community.
So I have so many questions for both of you, Mark and Board. But just a quick comment to our viewers coming on. So we've already got a great audience. There's several hundred people in the live audience here. We're pushing 500 right now. So that's really great for being just a few minutes into this thing. So I want to make it clear to everybody, like, this is your show, not just me and Chris to grill everybody who comes on. We kind of treat this as a conversation amongst each other. But if you have comments or questions, definitely post them, because then that gives us more to talk about and it brings you in as the audience. The other piece too is if we can even bring in more people to the show. So if you'd like to join us on the stage, if you think you have a game that's appropriate to talk about here, the whole concept of this show is it's Web3 game development, but from the developer's perspective. So we're here to talk about the issues you encounter in game development, what the challenges are, what the funding environment looks like, what it's like to scale up a game in this space, whatever it is, like that stuff that could help you be a better developer in this market. So with that said, and let the comments hopefully flow in here, Board, I'll start with you. Like, what's the biggest learning experiences you've had, I guess, both building this live events framework or live events oriented games, but also just like Web3 in general? What have been the major things that you've just uncovered along the way? And Mark, I'm going to follow you with the same question soon. So get ready.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a double-edged sword with live events, in that you can create FOMO, you can create demand for people to want to join something that is limited in time. I think you've seen Fortnite master this quite well when they've done these big events with Travis Scott, and they're doing something with Metallica soon. But the flip side is that it's hard to get anybody to show up live for anything. Like, people like on demand, right? we know this when we see how people stream television now. They watch their shows when they want to, not at 7 p.m. on ABC, you know, like, so that's very hard. And so our job really is to make Edison look something like a Coachella or Lollapalooza, where it's a must go to event, and not make it feel like a chore or inconvenient because we're asking you to show up when we want you to play. And I think the sort of hybrid approach we've started to discover is we'll kick off our big events with a specific time, and then we'll just leave it running for a day, 2 days, 3 days, so that if you live in a particular geography where it's not convenient, or you have, you know, a corporate job where you have to work 8 hours a day, you can still like show up, participate in the event somehow, even after the big hullabaloo is over. And that's been a nice mix for us and a big lesson for me in the last, 60 days.
Very interesting board. Thanks. So Mark, what about you? Like you're building a AAA game, so it's kind of a different, target market. I don't always think of AAA gaming as like the target market for Web3, but probably should be. Like, talk a little bit about that and what you've learned along the way.
Yeah, making a first-person shooter in today's environment would normally be suicide, right? But I've been OG crypto investor, but was always kind of dismissive of altcoins until the last cycle. And then saw some companies that just blew my mind, like Axie Infinity. How does these guys have a $12 billion market cap? Like, they would be in the top 20 of all publishers in the world if they were publicly listed. And then looked into it and began to understand beyond, the monetization aspects of blockchain and crypto, the novel game experiences you could provide for players. So decided to kind of embrace it completely, deciding it was a blue ocean of opportunity. And so for us, it's extremely ambitious, right? Not only are we trained to be a competitive AAA extraction shooter, we're also building a UGC platform, which is my personal goal. Shrapnel is a project I've been wanting to make for a very, very long time. But finally, we're at the point where tools have democratized development. I think in the same way videotape democratized filmmaking. Now, with tools like Unity and Unreal FN, regular players can make their own content. And what I observed in this past generation of players, or the newest generation or two, is they've grown up playing Minecraft, building their own worlds, and then age into Roblox, which is kind of like the Legos of game creation, right? And then when you become more competitive as a tween, you age into Fortnite. And then with UFEFN, now half the content, half the engagement is made by other players, which is amazing. But when you turn 18 to 35, there's nothing for you to age into. And I just don't think players are suddenly going to stop wanting to make games of their own. In fact, I think it's exactly the opposite. If you gave them the same level of tools that we have, I think they're ready to begin making amateur content. And that's our whole thesis.
I think the other thing I'd add to that is I think that also this younger generation is growing up with creator culture, and, a lot of the stuff that people used to do around these games and community for free, they realize that they can get paid to do, right? I mean, if you have you may not have like a lot of money, but maybe you built up a big Twitter following or a big TikTok following or whatever. And, that's valuable, right? I mean, boards, a lot of boards appeal is he's got a big account, right? And people follow him and he makes great content. So, I think that a lot of younger people are realizing that, they can also make money off their hobby as well, right? And Roblox and Fortnite and these things are enabling that too. They're not going to want to stop, they're going to want to be part of game making, but they're also going to want to profit from it. And, the AAA ecosystem, the traditional free-to-play ecosystem is just not friendly to that right now. So it's a wide open opportunity,
Arena's comment here is Fortnite players drop around 13, 14. I actually have no idea what the demographic is. I mean, my data point, my study of one is my own son, who's about to turn 13, tried Fortnite and ended up going back to Minecraft servers just because he prefers that. And I think just Minecraft is more accessible from a building creating standpoint. Whereas he never, like, I kept telling my kids, like, hey, go make a Fortnite island. You could make all kinds of money, and that was never persuasive to them for whatever reason. They just like messing around in Minecraft. But Board, I'm curious what you're seeing, like in the live events world. Is creator economy an aspect of how you're thinking about things? Like, it feels like you're doing something that's potentially at the center of a cultural shift in the way people go online.
I mean, I think the discussion around people aging out is really relevant here. What happens when you're older? You get interested in a lot of other things. You have responsibilities. You have to make money. You have to take care of your family. All these things. So, generally speaking, as you grow older, your total time available for entertainment and gaming goes down. And I think the amount of time that you want to spend on being a contributor or a creator inside of a game probably goes down too, right? Like the average 10-year-old might have more time to build inside of an open world than the average 30-year-old. And so if you're gonna go after that player who is 25 and up, you've got to make it really easy, not time exhaustive, and simple. And I think that right now, most of the open world games and platforms out there do feel like too expensive of a sort of time to investment ratio, right? Like, I'm not going to go and spend 40 hours a week building. Just can't do it. But if you give me an hour in a week that I can go and participate in something that feels like an event, maybe I can build stuff there. Maybe I can contribute as a performer, as a streamer, or just be a player and hang out and then go about my day. I think there's something to that. Like, I'm not, and I think every new game maker thinks this way. Is like, I'm not necessarily going to have a very easy time pulling you away from League of Legends or FIFA or Call of Duty. But if I can start with getting you for an hour a week, then there's a chance, right? I can build upon that. And I think that for us, at least, events are the strategy. Whether it proves out to be the right one, we'll see. But we're definitely going to be trying that for the next 12 months to see if that's the thing that makes our business click.
So I'd like to return to this topic of democratization, because it's one that's near and dear to me. This is the whole reason why 4 years ago I got into the business I'm doing now. Beamable is a platform for the back end. Mark was mentioning things like Unity and Unreal have opened up the front end so anybody can build a game now. But the back end to me seemed to be like this huge domain of complexity, something that studios end up spending millions and millions of dollars on. When one person researched this and found that, like, to actually scale up backend, it can cost like $20 million, which is not a surprise because that's how much we've invested into our platform at Beamable. So, our issues are different because we have to package it up for other developers, and productization is complicated versus internal development. But Mark, I know that you're doing some similar stuff around blockchain kind of integration technologies and stuff with Mercury. Is that something you can share a little bit about, like what kind of drove that? Because it seems like we're on a bit of a similar path in terms of noticing that some stuff is just way harder than it needs to be.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Beamable for exactly that reason. You didn't talk about your marketplace, but that's one of the harder problems to solve. Marketplaces are complex, and that's actually, if you could solve for a marketplace, then you don't have to figure out all kinds of other forms of monetization. You just let players decide what they want to trade with each other, and then you're suddenly monetizing the community. Also, your private cloud fits, our strategy with Avalanche, which is the only chain that allows you to do subnets, and subnets means zero gas fees because we can control that. And gas is a huge problem in terms of, Web2 players adopting for Web3. This thing you call Mercury, we built a Web3 API because we had to. For me, it's kind of a recapitulation of the early 2012 when I published Hawken. PlayFab, Firebase, GameLift didn't exist, and you had to cobble together all these services like you have, for your backend, from Amazon and Google and others. And then PlayFab came along and democratized telemetry on the back end for mobile developers. So Web3 is same complexity, bridging and layer one and subnets, and developers don't want to have to figure all this out. They just want to make a cool game, right? And the vast majority of developers are small, mobile, and independent teams. We always talk about the premium developers, but that's just the tip of the pyramid. The vast number of developers are out there that just some guys and girls that got together and want to make a cool game. So we were fortunate in that Mark McCurry joined us, the former head of blockchain at Microsoft. And this guy had previously built Web3 infrastructure for a couple of Fortune 500 companies. So he just came with this playbook and like overachieved like we couldn't believe. And suddenly we had this API that, because our goals are so ambitious and, in terms of UGC and things like, think about composability and decomposability for a minute. You know what an NFT gun is, yeah, but what if I want to make an NFT suppressor, stock, clip, buttstock, and then compose that, and then you buy it, but don't want that. You want the parts, and you decompose it. It's a fairly complex idea that's hard to solve for if you're brand new to Web3. Anyway, we designed all this, and like PlayFab was spun out of a developer publisher, we decided that we would do the same. We're not spinning it out. Actually, we're just licensing it to other developers. And certainly there are other ecosystems like Immutable and Forte and Mistin that are highly competitive, but we believe that we've built a larger set than any of them, and we're going to give a run at the market with it.
Nice. Yeah, I love that you brought up composability. That was the missing piece that I really saw in those technologies with PlayFab. Like, we had used PlayFab back at Disruptor Beam for certain things. I think Chris and I even worked on a project together at NBCU that required PlayFab. So we had gotten very familiar with it, and we were frankly kind of just disappointed about its limitations because it's a black box. It's not like Unity where you have the black box functionality, but you can also script it and share components with other people. We really wanted to bring that dimension to things where you could have a script language. In our case, we chose C# for the back end, just like they chose C# for the front end. So it just makes it like a more continuous game development experience for people. But then the composability comes in and being able to share that with other developers. And that's what led to our DPIN project that we're now launching. I talked about it a little bit in some blog posts, but it's the whole idea is you have all this infrastructure out there that people need to launch their games on. You need backend capacity. Could we help create that network, but then on top of it have a software layer that makes it possible for lots of backend technology components to be shared and exchanged between developers and within the community, so we can stop siloing all this development and spending, basically just wasting millions and millions of dollars doing it. I'm curious, Board, like you're building on the Improbable platform. So how do they solve for those things? I actually don't know that much about like day-to-day development in it. I think of it as like the massively multiplayer kind of real-time environment, like the MMO for thousands.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we're, Improbable in general and all the ventures are really building things that look like later stage Fortnite, right? So it's not hyper realism, especially because a lot of it runs in browser, but it's pretty damn good for what it is. And I think back a lot to like Nintendo's approach, which is you can build really fun, good games and not necessarily have the most powerful hardware or most realistic looking game, as long as the game mechanics are fun. But yeah, I mean, in terms of interoperability, right now, really, it's Unreal Engine and Unity, right? And so in the case of Improbable's tech stack, it's all based on Unreal Engine, and then it's an additional layer called MML, which is Metaverse Markup Language, and it's almost like JavaScript that lives on top of 3D objects that basically gives it further attributes. It designates what are the physics of it, how should it exist in certain types of environments. So, ultimately, a 3D object is a 3D object. It does not need to be on-chain. MML adds on-chain elements to it. And so the idea with Edison, the way we're thinking about it, is that anybody who shows up as a particular character, as a skin, or has accessories in our game, that can absolutely exist in anyone else's world that wants to accept it. And that's what it comes down to, right? Like interoperability is less of a technical problem now and more of a legal problem. When you think about a game like Super Smash Brothers, like that was not necessary. It was actually a huge technical undertaking too by Mr. Sakurai, but also just like getting Capcom and Squaresoft and all these different companies to like agree to have their character appear in the game in a certain way. That's very hard to do. And so with Web3 and new intellectual property and new characters that are being created, I think the fundamental culture shift basically is that everybody sees the opportunity of having your characters and your IP appear in other worlds versus having to protect it and not allow it to show up in any other place. So you're sort of like seeing a friendly vampire attack where I want as many people to have Mario in their game as possible, because then Mario gets more famous and they'll buy stuff from us who sells all the Mario things. So that's kind of the optimistic viewpoint I have on it. The flip side is that you have to also let go of control, and invariably there will be people who take your characters and your world and fill it with dicks, right? Like that's what happens on the internet. If you let people do whatever they want, they will do horrible things. And so you have to think about moderation.
I've never heard of that.
Listen, that's the internet in a nutshell. If you let people do whatever they want.
It's TTP, right? Time to penis.
Time to penis. It's just a classic.
Yeah.
Rated M for everyone is basically the metaverse. And so, but it's okay. It's okay. I've accepted that. And I do think it's very important to protect kids and all that. But we also live in a world where, any kid with a cell phone can access the internet and thus can access very terrible things. And it's very difficult to police that. So I think the freedom we have is like, let's let people create and modify and build upon other people's work. And perhaps, stop with the walled gardens and like the overly protective nature of trying to not let anybody, use the goods that our community has created. So it's not an easy problem, but a very short, or I guess a long-winded answer to your question is, I think interoperability absolutely is possible. And there are going to be a few game engines that everybody uses, and then people will just build layers on top of them that make them more useful.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely see it with like all of these like collabs with PFP communities. Like I'm getting ready to, drop the ability for a bunch of those PFP communities to play with their avatar in game. Nifty Islands has done it, Pixels has done it, and it's a great, it's an amenity to those PFP holders, right? Because it's like, hey, now you can come hang out. If you're in one of those big collections, you're going to have, dozens of games that you can play in as your character, right? And as a developer, you're doing acquisition, huge groups of 10,000 at a time, not, one by one, or at least that's the hope. I was pretty impressed that Disney announced that they're going to allow UGC with whatever they're doing with Epic and Fortnite. I thought that was, a pretty, having worked there and run games there, like I know how big a decision that was and how many people probably were, like losing their shit and will, probably freak out when they see what's done with it. Right. Like that Disney's certainly gonna be very cautious about moderating that content. But, that's part of the reason that I think these internet brands are gonna be really advantaged, going forward, is that it's just so hard to work with a lot of this like Hollywood IP in an interoperable metaverse where people can do whatever they want and they can make UGC. And even the rights for that shit, like, we talked about rights on the call on this podcast before, but like a lot of these older properties, somebody may have the game rights and somebody else may have like the TV rights. And, from a streaming perspective, if I make content in the game and then stream it, is it a TV show and blah blah blah, and a whole room of lawyers are gonna will argue over that. So I think that it's a real opportunity for creating like not just new experiences but new brands that can lean into this kind of environment.
Board, I've always thought of one of the opportunities around these kind of concert type experiences is to just bring to life like the merch table. I think I said conference, but I meant concert. The merch table of a concert.
The merch at conferences is not that impressive. It's like tote bags and USB
that's
drives.
I don't want it. Please don't stop putting things in my hands. But at a concert, I want to get at that because it's sort of a token of having been there and being part of the experience.
Yeah, no, I think that's 100% right. And the idea of being able to earn specific digital items during an event or during a particular game mode is kind of the equivalent of like, I went to this, God, I hate that I'm going to use this analogy. I went to this particular Taylor Swift concert and she had a poster that was just for that event. And now I have it on my wall and all my friends are jealous of me because I got the 1 out of 100 Tay-Tay poster. That's it, right? And with things like, skins and guns and weapons and stuff in like, CSGO or whatever, there are sort of time sensitive things that are available for sale and somewhat limited. And I think that's special. But I do think that designating digital objects that you obtained during specific moments in time, hopefully through achievement, not because you just paid $1 million to buy it. I think there's a big market for that. And for that to become a reality, of course, you need a very large player base, because who cares about your fancy rare digital object if there's no one around you to gawk at you for owning it, right? So first you build the audience and the player base and demand for the need to look cool, and then you can sell digital goods. And I think for us, at least, why we think that 10,000 people concurrently in one space is really important is you probably are going to be more incentivized to buy a really expensive and showy skin if you're around this massive group of people versus only being able to show it off to 100 people or whoever's watching your stream. So that's kind of our thought process there for why it's very important to give people these digital objects to stand out amongst the very large crowd.
Mark and Chris, I'm curious how you're thinking about that too. I mean, we often talk about the utility of these objects within a game world, but what about just sort of the pure joy of collecting, owning, see and be seen, ego aspects?
Yeah, for me, it's part of the larger cultural ethos of crypto, being a crypto bro, right? And I think this is what Web2 players don't understand about the joy of that. Is first of all, it's all community based, and it's not about that I have an expensive monkey cartoon picture. It's an expression of my lifestyle, and I'm able to increasingly express it in these interactive experiences. So let's say I'm in love with John Wick, and I love my John Wick skin that I play in Shrapnel. Well, I'd love to translate that and have it be interoperable in other games, and that's a interoperability that makes sense. One that doesn't make sense is me taking my sniper rifle into your soccer game, right? Even as a flex, it's stupid. So I see this as a larger motion, even tied to meme coins, because meme coins are just the heights of crypto bro degeneracy. Like they outrightly have no utility, and yet it's my kind of ridiculous commitment to this idea that I would own and promote those. And then increasingly that's an expression again of my online lifestyle.
Well, here's the game we talked about last week, Banana. It still seems like it's going strong. Like, I don't know, this is the game that breaks practically every rule that I know of from community building, but I guess it's the meme coin of Steam is the way to think of that.
They can't keep it out.
I don't know. Is anyone playing this game? Quote unquote game?
It was the most played game last week.
Do you have a rare skin yet?
No.
I wonder if Gabe is going to personally, if Gabe Newell is going to just show up and be like, you know what, guys, this is NFTs and we're going to cancel it and it's off the platform because we don't like that stuff.
I love, by the way, that it's that popular user-defined tags for this product include psychological horror, dating sim. No, I mean, Club Penguin, the whole economy was based on cosmetics and, and events, right? We had these parties every month, and the point of the party was to come play the party and get the virtual items and dress up for the party. And, if it was the Halloween party, you needed to get your Halloween stuff. If it was the Marvel party, you wanted to dress like Iron Man, whatever, but really like making your own unique look and being like a Frankenstein Iron Man or whatever was what was really cool. Not, not just putting on kind of the costume as intended. And, if it's the Halloween party this year, if you've got Halloween stuff from 2 Halloween parties ago, like people see that and they, they're like, oh, like this guy's an OG, and there's a lot of cred that comes with that. So, I think that, look, cosmetics work, right? I mean, people will tell you, you have to have a game that's, at massive scale for cosmetics to really work. I don't know if that's entirely true, but for sure, cosmetics can work, and collecting, is a tried and true behavior. And I think that, if anything, like, I mean, I always say like Marvel Snap would be a way better game, and it would solve a lot of problems if you could trade, because I used to collect those Marvel cards when I was in high school working in a comic book shop. And, like I love those old Jim Lee collector cards and all that stuff, but that game kind of has a weak collecting experience. And if you can't trade and nothing's really scarce, like it can be rare, but if it's not scarce, like it's just not as cool, like there's just a whole side of like, when you go buy trading cards or sports cards or whatever, like there's a whole culture around ripping packs and, finding the rare cards and scarce cards, and, and selling, you can sell those at a at a comic book store or something. They'll buy them and, put them in a, plastic case and whatever. I mean, so I feel like there's, like you have to have kind of some of these, marketplace dynamics in order to have a really cool collecting experience. And I think that, and if you look at like a lot of free to play games a lot of these gacha games, they're all collection based. But what does it really mean if other people can't see what you have and can't, and you can't trade, like, I just think it's so much of a better experience, kind of business model aside.
Yeah, partly the logic behind the achievement systems when those first arrived, although those also kind of give you a roadmap of cool things to do in games. But hey, we've already got the clones appearing of the Banana game. We've got Banana Cat launching on July 8th. So mark your
this
calendar.
One's better because it has a banana and a cat.
That's the theory in this game.
And cats are big.
Hey, we have almost 1,000 people in the audience here, and you guys have to ask more questions. I'm good at asking questions, so I'll keep doing it. But we've got so many of you here. Just post a comment on X or LinkedIn. We're streaming to a whole bunch of different places here, but you've got some real legends here in the room. So I want to make sure we give some time over this hour or so that we'll be together to give space to the audience here to find out what you're curious about. So Mark is building AAA shooter game in Web3. Board is building a huge events platform, basically concerts plus gaming, and kind of defining some new game designs within that, which actually I'd love to dig in a little bit next, Board, if you don't mind. Like you mentioned early on that some of the interesting discoveries you've made is like the way having that massive amount of concurrency leads to more game designs. I love the idea of like when game technology sort of gets put out there, that then game developers start figuring out the new things that they can do with it. It's like the touch screen. Like when the touch screen came out, it took a little bit of time before people figured out all the cool things you could do with it. And of course, the legendary game was Angry Birds that like really leaned hard into the screen. So with high concurrency, what are the types of things there that we might do that's completely new?
Yeah, and just to kind of like establish the premise even more, I mean, you can think about examples over the last 30 years in terms of game tech and how that changed gaming. Obviously, online play was a massive one, right? Like that creates a very different dynamic when you can play against people all over the world. Smaller things in the hardware realm in terms of like motion controls, vibrating controllers. These are things that led developers to have really creative ideas about how they could actually change what you see on the screen. And so that kind of thing is always exciting to me. I think when it comes down to mass concurrency, there's a lot of ideas that come to mind. I think certain types of game modes, like first-person shooters, get extremely difficult, right? If you think about 5,000 people shooting bullets into the same spot, just technically very difficult to do. Also, probably not fun. If you're thinking of a game like Fall Guys, that instead of having 100 people, has 5,000 people, and there are folks that are just permadeath, being eliminated from the course, and then by the end of the game, you have very few people. That's fun. Or as Mark alluded to, if you've got a battle game where you've got truly a team of 2,500 people times 2,500 people, and you want to be on the winning team, that's also very interesting. And it just feels different when they're not bots, right? Like bots are getting pretty good, but if there's a human behind each avatar on that giant battlefield, I think that's really interesting. So we're still experimenting and trying to figure out what format works. But what I will say is the game modes that we've done that include sort of running and racing through something that has a lot of pitfalls and dangers. When you're doing that with even 100 people around you and you're seeing that and you're hearing their voice, it just creates this energy and this feeling that is different than like a traditional video game. So I'm trying to capture that feeling and apply it to a lot of different game modes and see what we can do with it. So that's my take on it. But very, very curious to see what you guys think about our upcoming game modes and whether you want to call BS on me.
Boy, free idea for you: running with the bulls, the Pamplona run.
That's fun.
I like it. That's definitely rated M. Very gory.
You can be gored, and
people can be bystanders, or they could jump in. They could just start running if they feel like
we'll do a whole campaign with PETA and say, hey, the real world version is very dangerous. Animals get killed. Let's do the virtual one. I think this is a winner. I appreciate you guys. You can send me the bill for the free PR.
With them, you have to maybe spin it as you're going to expose the violence against the animals as part of it, so that they don't think it's glorification. I don't know. I think there's some. This is definitely an idea. I'm happy to advise on that game when you build it.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is
want to be the bull.
I think the other thing is just being timely. Like the banana game is such a stupid but good example of you don't have to spend a lot of time to get a lot of attention, and you should know it's going to fizzle out very quickly. Like in 2 weeks, no one's going to play the banana game. I hope. I'm scared for society if people are still playing it, but
it's been going for like 3 weeks, dude.
Oh God! All right,
cow clicker went for a while, so I don't know. It was just time for another cow clicker.
Don't underestimate the dopamine addiction of clickers, man.
Yeah. Well, I think the lesson for people who are building bigger games that take years to produce is that you sort of need to build in these small mini games and side quests that can entertain people too, that sort of add to the overall lore and environment that get people hooked, and then hopefully then they get pulled into the bigger game, right, where they spend hundreds and hundreds of hours and it's in a very meaningful way. But you definitely see now in Steam, like every few months, there's just this dumb game that just captures the attention of everybody. And I think everyone now is racing to try to be the next person who effectively creates a meme. It's a meme game, right? It's just, It happens to work for a very short amount of time, and hopefully it can monetize very quickly, and then people are off to the next thing.
Yeah, what Robin Guo at A16Z just posted about the banana game and said, called it Meme Lord Distribution, which I think is a good one. Hey, I have a question for you guys related to what you were just saying, Board. Bots to be excluded or learn to embrace them and find a way to incorporate them creatively.
Mark, how are you guys thinking about bots in Shrapnel?
I, for one, welcome our AI overlords that are going to be taken over anyway. We're using AI bots actually to QA level design. You can, we're using a service where you can have a bot traverse a new build 100,000 times, like in 10 minutes, to find gaps in the geometry in places where the characters get hung up. Eventually, we want to add bots to the game. I think bots are a great way to onboard noobs, so you can train up and not get murdered and have all your stuff taken away and say, I'm quitting this game, but can go on Noob Island and play with a bunch of bots and train up. So that if you're joining a game year after its launch, you're not the worst player in the session.
Mark, talk about the choice of an extraction shooter game for Web3. Like bring it into focus. What kind of inspired you around that intersection specifically, as opposed to any other kind of shooter, for example?
Sure. For me, it was just a perfect fit for a blockchain game, right? Because I don't win by murdering everybody else and being the last one alive. I win by getting out alive with the most loot, which is a very different idea and produces really novel strategies. And also from session to session, it can feel like a poker game where, God damn it, I got killed right away and I lost, all these fragments or shards that I was collecting. I want to get back in there because Chris is killing me, and it produces a whole other uh, dynamic, I think. And then that dynamic can extend outside of the game into the collectability and training or trading that we talked about.
Cool. So, Board, in your game, I get the merch table aspect that might work. I don't know how much you're able to talk about all the things you're doing yet, but how about the trading aspect? Like when I buy something at a merch table at a concert, I feel like it's very personal to me, and I'm not going to want to trade it away. How do you think about that kind of resale aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Web3 space has really been hung up on trading and volume and transactions, and I think we've all seen that recruits maybe the wrong type of customer. And so the ideal case for us is that we're expanding our audience, our player base, and it's just a lot of direct sales of goods that we produce to hopefully the end consumer. If people want to trade them on the back end using existing NFT marketplaces, cool. We're not necessarily trying to monetize off the volume, the trading volume. And, we also think, or I also think that just incentivizes us to do a lot of bad things and not necessarily drive people to what we want, which is just to keep collecting and buying new things. So the path to monetization is just direct sale of goods, hopefully high volume, low cost. And then the other piece of it is sponsorship. So when you think about events, when you're concentrating attention and people in a specific moment, that's a big opportunity to bring in brand sponsors, companies that don't necessarily want to bring in or build their own game, but can work with us to create a very time sensitive, smaller party game. That's something that we can absolutely do. So I think that, you've probably seen a few brands get into the space, maybe partner with Fortnite to create their own maps and things like that. We can do that as well. I think we can enhance it because we can do the mass concurrency thing. And so I think in the short term, that'll be a really powerful form of monetization. And then beyond that, I think that we'll see new formats of monetization emerge as people start to use what we're building as a way to express themselves, right? To stream content while they're actually in our experiences. I think we'll see a lot of content-based monetization as well. But yeah, I don't want to get trapped in the NFT trading game. I think we just want to make cool stuff, sell it to people who want it, and that's the business.
I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, this is sort of the channel for that, to talk about real Web3 game development issues. So I haven't built a game myself in like 4 years because I've been building Beamable, a tech platform to help people build games. So, but I've seen a lot of game developers come and go, particularly in Web3. And one of the things that I've just seen be self-destructive is as soon as the NFT mint is out, too many teams get caught up in the whole chasing the trades, pumping the token. Like it just takes them so off task of the core of actually making a fun game. And I've actually just seen that destroy studios as they get obsessed with it. And I don't know, tough questions, but Chris, Mark, what do you think of that?
Yes.
Yeah, we treat the two things as separate products within the company for exactly that danger. The danger is it's a lot of money on chain, and you can get just completely distracted by it. And the truth is the tokens are it's just rampant speculation, because until the title's out, there's no real demand for the token yet. I think this is part of the deserved reputation that Web3 has with regular players. I keep hearing, well, we have to do a better job of educating them. It's like, we don't have to fucking educate them, man. I don't want to be educated about anybody about anything. It's instead, you need to provide them a novel experience that drives them to that. So our technique to convert Web2 players is just simple. First of all, it's always about a fun game. It doesn't matter what technology, we can run down a long list of mostly technical innovations, and they added it, and then I don't really care. It's not that fun, right? So first of all, it has to be fun.
Yeah.
And a lot of these Web3 developers don't care about that. They care about monetization of their players first, not fun. And then I think you want to look for. Here's an example of a novel solution that we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Think about Roblox for a minute. Like there's 850 million monthly actives. Kids have made millions of games on the platform, but I guarantee you guys kids only play 3 to 5 of the same games all the time. Part of that problem is there's no way for a kid to promote their content. There literally isn't a way that they can streamlessly advertise and promote, right? So they have a discovery problem. Well, we're going to have the exact same problem on Shrapnel. We have people make a ton of maps. Maybe a bunch of them are cool, but nobody knows about them. You can take, with cryptocurrency, you can stake tokens against a map that maybe the three of us just love. Like, dude, have you seen this map these guys have created? It's amazing. No one knows about it. We can stake our tokens against it. Then we're curators of the content, and we share in the reward with that. We'll get a share of the token revenue from players that play that. And what's cool about that is then you're really aligning the community with what it wants, with what the players want, with what the developer is hoping that the players will create, as opposed to players fighting the developer, trying to exploit it with bots and that kind of thing to get out of the game instead of contribute to the game. And that's when we looked at what could Web3 do. That's how we approached it. Let's just find cool things it could do. And then players don't have to be educated. Instead, they start playing Web2 fashion. We send them some push notifications. Hey, dude, you're getting really good at this game, and you own $40 worth of stuff now. If you would just create a wallet, you can have it, do whatever you want with it. That's a pretty powerful economic incentive, rather than, let me tell you what's cool about blockchain. It reminds me of that old joke, how do you know if somebody's a vegan or bisexual? Don't worry, they'll tell you, right? That's how blockchain bros are. Like, oh my God, dude, like, okay, I believe you, but why do I care about this? It really has to be an experience that makes them care.
Yeah. Looks like we have maybe Aaron Nonis has jumped into the room.
Oh, I think Aaron, I sent the link so Aaron can watch, but I don't think he meant to join. Aaron is my COO.
Okay.
Hey, Aaron.
Well, Aaron, you joined
friends.
the live link. You're on the you're live here. We got 1,000.
Let's go through the P&L statement for live.
We got 1,000 people here in the audience. What do you want to share with everybody? If you want to watch it, it's on X. And by the way, if anyone else wants to join the channel, we're always happy to open up the floor and have people jump in. But welcome,
I have,
Aaron.
I have a question for the Shrapnel guys. So you recently redid your tokenomics, right? What did you guys learn, and sort of what did you revise?
Well, we learned that we didn't know what we were doing at the beginning when we created our unlock schedule. Really, things evolved over time, and in this, crypto is such a fast-moving industry. We realized that we had created too large an unlock, and so we went back and starting with ourselves and said we've got to smooth this curve out, and in trying to be with the ethos of the community, the founders have now the longest unlock, and the earliest investors in that took the most risk have the shortest unlock, and then of course all the players have no cliff. They're all unlocked, and as you can imagine, that was a hard sell on a bunch of people, but I've got a great group of partners, and they all agreed to it because it was healthy. It's healthier for the ecosystem, right?
Yeah, totally makes sense. It aligns everyone's incentives, right?
Mm-hmm. With
the long-term success of the project.
Yeah, I'll just say from my end, I mean, I remember getting the email about that change, and I think it was smart, right? Like, I think every investor wants asymmetric upside, and it's like, are you really going to argue against the short-term, win you might get versus this becomes massive? Like, I want Shrapnel to be a massive game, and I'd rather wait longer and see that play out. So I'm really happy about their strategy, and it seemed like it was an easy decision for most people involved.
So is part of the learning experience to not get overly enthusiastic around like token design early on, versus combined with a willingness to just change things around as you discover how the market's engaging with it?
I think maybe token design, not quite the right term. Tokenomics is what you're referring to, which is really the pie chart. Who gets what and when do they get it? Token design, if you're working like we are with a layer one and you're developing your own contracts, that's one of the great things about blockchain. You don't have to take an off the shelf system if you want to roll your own, and then these kind of contracts can allow you to do all kinds of things. I've talked a number of times about sharing downstream revenue. That's great for your user generated creators, but maybe not fair to another developer if I take revenue all the way going forward. I'll tell you why I think that's smart. Let's say all of us have got a Web3 game, and all of us are making different John Wick skins and skins for weapons and stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, from the player's perspective, I want to take my John Wick skin into all the other games, and I want to buff them up and do all kinds of things. But as a player, I didn't buy it in your game, John. I bought it over in Chris's game. So why should you be incentivized as a developer publisher to now be responsible for his NFT? So to make this work, I need to be less greedy. I need to say, well, on my platform, I get a 2% transaction fee, but on any other platform after the second sale, maybe I get 0. And that way the player can enjoy taking his character into other games, and then you're not disincentivized to not allow that kind of interoperability. I actually think that's the bigger interoperability problem than trying to adjust a character's lethality and survivability into another title. It's really, why are you economically incentivized to allow for interoperability?
It's interesting, because that's sort of similar to the way we're thinking about our marketplace of composable components on the Beamable DPIN network that we're creating, in the sense that if you create a code module that people want to use, let's just say you invent the best matchmaking system and suddenly everybody wants to use it, that code could have some native token staked against it, and then you could start earning a royalty that you decide is appropriate for your particular piece of code, and then people can just start using it. So that, I think, is one of the really interesting things with Web3, is just actually having the ability to do that value exchange between people who make stuff and people can potentially take advantage of it. And it's been a missing part from the back end, and could foster a whole new world of like metaverse-y kind of creation where people are building games from components with front end, which is a lot easier today, but a lot of back end components that are more off the shelf so that you can use them.
I invite everybody to take a look at Lamina One, a layer one project by Neil Stevenson. Neil lives up here in Seattle. He's actually I'm friends with Neil, and he's trying to take that more open, community-based approach in their layer one, where he's trying to solve for these interoperability cases, but on the business side, on the revenue side, so it's fair to everyone. The white paper is fascinating.
Yeah, we've done a little bit of work with Lamina One and done some AMAs and stuff with them. That's a great suggestion actually for this show. We should get Neil on here, or someone from the Lamina One team, to talk more about what they're building.
There's another, sorry, Chris, there's another thing I'll point you towards. It's little known, but it's one of the more important things I think going on in interoperability and metaverse, in the metaverse in general. And that's the verse programming language at Epic.
Sure.
Tim Sweeney very quietly had been working for 7 or 8 years on this language. And when they announced it, it made almost no splash at all. But when I've talked to Tim about, why are you doing this? Why is this important? He said, the metaverse is going to work kind of like the internet. I'm going to go from one visual compute experience to another, just like I go from one web page to another. But I need to be able to do things like drive a car seamlessly, from board's experience into my game, and that calls for something called shared transactional memory, and that's the antithesis of what any developer ever wants to happen, and that's shared memory of two games or experiences, so that handoff can happen in real time. And he realized he needed to create an entirely new programming language for it. And you can see this kind of hidden in Tim's public statements, where he ultimately believes all this is going, but that's what he's articulated to me. And
I didn't realize Verse did that. I mean, I knew about Verse and that they were using it as their scripting language, but I never understood the shared transactional memory element. That's wild.
Isn't that crazy? And if you think about it, it makes absolute sense. Yeah, of course, that's where all this is going. We're completely focused on the dumb problem right now, is how can I get my sword into your game? But he's, a decade or two ahead with, well, what do you want to do? What about this all happening in real time? And there's a universal scene description format for everybody to work in, right?
I saw something really interesting the other day. It's not the shared memory thing that you just talked about, but it's sort of related, which is this idea of having kind of let's not do that one. How about
there's no results for Hyperportal Radoff.
Yeah, we're gonna show the right one.
Is that your new moniker? Are you rebranding now?
It's a new band.
I was talking about metaverse before it was cool, and I've wrote it all the way down. So I'm just sticking with it.
Did you call it Hyperportal? Maybe that's what we have to call it now, that we can't say metaverse anymore, and we can get a programmable royalty on it, and you can get like a tithe every time we use it.
I'm trying to find it. There was a presentation, a couple of related things that I've seen recently. One is at Consensus. I saw a presentation from John Linden from Mythical, where he showed essentially portals that connect different game experiences with completely different graphics between each other. And their approach was to use essentially a cloud command, a GPU command streaming technology to render different worlds even through the different portals. But then I just saw this other thing that's just built around Mozilla hubs here. Here we go. So this is sort of really cool. They're basically using WebXR, and they're opening up portals between things like Gorilla Tag. And you can go through Gorilla Tag, and then you can see a portal. The really neat thing about it is just the ability to actually see that portal, and it brings you into a completely different like graphical experience. You go from Mozilla hubs into Gorilla Tag. So this idea of having hyper portals, which is my word for it, instead of hyperlinks, I think is a really interesting way to think about the way we might connect these different worlds in the future. And that could itself become a new form of distribution. I don't know what the economic incentives are, why you might want to connect one of your own games to something else, but it's sort of an interesting idea. Maybe it'll be the same incentive that hyperlinks have today, which is the more you get connected, the more you kind of create these network effects that bring people into your product.
And so are those separate servers, or are you basically stepping out of one server into another server there?
Well, I don't know how their implementation worked, but I think in that case, it was basically pixel streaming through the portal. So you'd open up the portal. This is sort of a really interesting application of cloud streaming technology, because it's super hard, technically speaking, to have one game with a complete 3D environment, and then you have a portal in which you're rendering in advance everything happening with that world. That's like at the level of not really solvable. But if instead you're essentially doing cloud streaming of the pixels, or this clever stuff that Mythical is doing around GPU command streaming, you're essentially just rendering a video of what's coming from that environment into the portal, so that you're getting a preview of what it will be like. And then you pop through and you assume the rendering state of that. And if you're using pixel streaming again, you're just kind of, you're now pixel streaming in the immersive state of that game. So it's like I've been looking for like.
I mean, it's not dissimilar to what Improbable is doing, right?
I don't know. Is it? You tell us, Board.
Yeah, I mean, it is pixel streaming, so similar technology. Currently, our friends at NVIDIA enable that for a very affordable price. And like for example, on our end, we try to load a certain amount of the world at a time, and you can portal into another one. And we haven't really played with this idea of showcasing what's happening inside of another place, but I guess fundamentally it's kind of like a millicast, right? It's literally just a video screen that happens to be an oval, and then once you walk up to the video screen, you jump into that world. But what we've seen in the demo you just shared was it happens instantaneously, which is kind of hard to do without like having someone download a very large file. And that's something I think about a lot. Like I think we all grew up and played a lot of video games where there's a 60 seconds of time before you hit play and then your game actually starting, and it's just excruciating. So my goal is always, how do you minimize the wait time between hitting start and actually playing the game? And so far the tech is not quite there to make that seamless.
So we're coming up a little bit over the hour that we set aside for this. So I just, number one, want to take some time to thank Mark and Board for showing up. And
thank you guys
on this. And Chris, certainly thank you for doing this with me again for the third week. I just want to sort of get some closing comments for today from everybody. And I just want to ask about, like, what do you think about the current state of Web3 gaming today that you want to leave folks with? I'll start with my take. I feel like there was a lot of when I first got into this like 4 years ago, there was a lot of aspiration. There was a lot of teams that frankly didn't know what the heck they were doing, and they talked a big game and they didn't really have the ability to execute. That is completely different today than it was 4 years ago. I see really talented teams building things. What goes all hand in hand with that is really great games don't just pop out of nothing. Like it actually takes a lot of effort. Like the fastest game I ever shipped was like a year, but that was like an HTML5 game on Facebook. Like once you start getting into real immersive games, it just takes a lot of effort, and it should actually, because my whole theory of games is like, you got to get the fun right. And if it takes you a long time to go through these iterations, like when I built my Star Trek game, we built 4 games that weren't that great. And fortunately we only spent like a maximum of 2 months on each while we were kind of prototyping it. And the fifth one had the magic in it, and we ran with that, and it's done pretty well and continues to run to this day. But you just need to give people kind of runway and time to discover the market, discover their audience. And now what I'm seeing is game teams that are actually doing that. And I don't know if all these things will really even ship this year, but we're starting to see versions of it or betas and whatnot of like really great gameplay. And maybe by next year, some of these games that have been incubating in the market for a while in Web3 are going to emerge. So that's my take on the market. I'll give you all a chance to just comment on this. Mark, you've been nodding a little bit. Like, what's your thought on the state of the market?
Well, the obvious difference is, between the early wave, which was mostly Web3 developers trying to make games, and now real game developers. But what I've found interesting is how I'll name Dead Drop, Off the Grid, Wildcard, Shrapnel. All of us are experimenting with allowing access to the player community much earlier than we normally do. So as you guys are well aware, in AAA gaming, you really go off and do, like you did, everything in secret. Oh my God, we'd never want them to know about this one version that we created because it was such a bad idea. Here, all of us are exposing the community to the game at the earliest possible point. Like, we're in this early access experiment where we bring the game up for like we're up right now on Epic Game Store for a week, and then we'll bring it down and then make all kinds of changes to it. And that's so hard as a AAA developer to expose ourselves in this way. We're just not, everything has to be perfect, right? Because if they judge you one time, they're never going to come back. But the Web3 community is just so, I don't know, they're so enthusiastic and so with us. I think all of us, when I say that they show up every other, shrapnel training exercise that we have. And we're getting real useful feedback from them as a result. And again, as you said, John, this is part of democratizing gaming. There's always the community and what they want, and the developer what they want, and this is helping align us because we've started that relationship earlier than we've ever done before.
Mark, I'm so glad you mentioned Wildcard, which incidentally, and I didn't ask Mark to draw it out, but Wildcard is another company building on the Beamable platform. So
shout out to the Bettners.
Yeah, we love them. I
think they may be listening, by the way.
Okay, well, we're going to call you out, Paul and/or Katie. We would love to have you come on the next episode.
That'd be great.
The invitation was made already, but I know you're super busy. It's hard to make a game. It's hard to come up for air, but we'd love to have you on to talk about these things. And for those who don't know, Paul, ran the studio at Microsoft that operated Age of Empires for years, and then did Words with Friends. So epic game developer. So we would love to have you here, Paul. All right. So Board, give us your insights in the state of things in Web3 gaming specifically.
I definitely think that to Mark's point, sharing more early is helpful. And I think that the caveat to that is you can only do that if you don't charge people too much money very early, right? So if before you release your first glimpse of your game, you're selling stuff for an Ethereum, 2 Ethereum, and then people wait 2 years to see something, the expectations are completely out of whack. And you have to contrast that to the fact that people will pre-order a game like Cyberpunk, or the next, or Elden Ring, and pay $70 and get a masterpiece of a game, right? So I think the better strategy is, you certainly can sell stuff in advance for a reasonable amount of money, share what you're building along the way, let people test it, be very candid that it is in beta, it is in alpha. I remember at the last GDC and the GDC before that, I tried out Shrapnel and saw their progress, and it was great to see that. I was very well aware that things were being tested, and I've seen the improvement over time, which is awesome. But when you let people go along for the ride with you and then give you feedback, and maybe even implement some of the feedback that a player has given you, and they see that in the game, that makes them feel very special. That makes them a massive advocate for you. And this is where gaming development has gone, right? The past titans of the industry, they've gotten away with previewing a game, you know, and then like releasing it 2 years later with absolutely no secret, you know, leaks associated with it. And they could do that, right? Because they've had like a 30-year franchise. But today, if you're building a new IP from scratch, you got to bring fans along for the ride and make them part of the process. And that means you're going to have to hear some shitty comments and get criticized, and maybe turn away people who don't understand that an early game is not a final game. But I think that's a lot more valuable, especially in Web3, when people have very high expectations for what you know they're looking to see when they've spent a lot of money. So that's my big advice. And last piece of advice, if you're getting into the business of designing games, read a book called The Art of Game Design by Jesse Schell. It basically is a textbook lesson on like how to design good games, how to understand them. If you're a Web3 developer, if you're an engineer who thinks, hey, I could be a game designer too, there's a lot of stuff you don't know. You should read the basics and then get back to building your game.
Yeah, the Book of Lenses or something, I think is.
Yep,
That's
exactly.
separate. Yeah.
Great book. Chris, take us home here.
On the state of Web3.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Where are
think
we today?
I've never been more bullish. I've never been more bullish on crypto in general. I mean, I posted something on LinkedIn today, but I think, you know, I think we're almost past the regulatory kind of point of no return. Like, and I do think that the US legalizing crypto is going to open things up in ways that that people may not fully realize, because the US isn't just another market. It's the biggest market in the world. A lot of the innovation, a lot of the game developers come from here. A lot of people that are sitting on the sidelines like Steam or Apple or whatever are doing so because of regulatory concerns. So I think that, you know, we could be in a space by before the election, crypto is legalized and signed, you know. Fit 21 already passed the House. So I think once that happens, the other thing is that as you know, the governments have gotten this idea that maybe crypto isn't the enemy, and they're realizing that with stable coins they can use stable coins to buy debt from you know, the treasury, which is a big problem because of de-dollarization that's happening around the world. But what that means is governments are going to be supportive of people pushing money into the crypto ecosystem through these stablecoin instruments. And once that happens, I think the money's not really going to go back. Like, I think a lot of money is going to start to shift into the crypto ecosystem. And, you know, it's like you just want to be a big catcher's mitt to catch it. You know what I mean? But you know, I think crypto gaming, like right now, we're in a bit of a sentiment slump, I guess, in crypto Twitter, but like this comes and goes, you know. I mean, sentiment changes in crypto Twitter all the time. You know, there's a lot of good games coming. They're real games. You know, I think that I feel like we're like things are going to take off within the next 18 months. You know, it's just a question of like, is it 3? Is it 6? Is it, you know, whatever. But like, we're kind of there. I mean, I was talking to a friend today who was a long-term game developer who, you know, starting to get interested in you know, he was the CEO of the company that made Payday. And he's he's getting interested in Web3. And, you know, I was telling him, like, you know, when I got into this a couple years ago, it was the fucking bear market. You know, like nobody wanted to fund this shit. You know, everyone was fudding us. Like, you know, you would post about Web3 on LinkedIn and 1,000 people would jump on you and say, why don't you just use a database? You know, but like now, you know, like I think people are starting to see that there's something here. And I was like, now is a good time, you know? So it's not easy. It's not for the faint of heart, but I think for those who kind of persevere and keep chipping away at it, you know, like these guys said, I mean, you get a lot of chances in Web3. You can fuck up and come back. And, you know, like, I think we're getting ready to see a big moment. So I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, thanks for closing on that note, Chris. So I want to thank everybody again. So Mark, Board, you're welcome on the show anytime, but especially want to thank the live audience here. We've got 1,200 live viewers watching right now across YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. We're doing this weekly, so it's 2 p.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesdays. So tune in. We'll share the next guest in the next few days or so, but we're going to always be kind of taking it from a developer's perspective. So it's going to be people that are running studios, epic game designers, people that are working in the gaming aspects of like the chains, all that kind of stuff. So the real opportunity for you is to hear from leaders in the industry and hear how they're really going to build their game and build their business around that game. So thanks so much, everybody. Your time is super valuable. So thanks for participating, watching, listening, learning. I trust it was valuable, and we'll be back doing this again. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys. Thanks for coming.
Thanks
Bye.
for having me.
Thanks all.